They said no one had ever defied the HOA before. They said painting a house that color would destroy property values. But when she stepped out with that paint roller, dressed in black, smiling like she already knew she'd win, the entire neighborhood froze. And by the time the HOA tried to stop her, it was already too late. Hey everyone, welcome back to HOA Stories. I'm Daniel. I live down the street from where this all happened. A quiet, clean, perfect neighborhood. Until she moved in. If you've ever hated power-hungry HOA rules, hit that subscribe button. And type, down with HOA, in the comments. Because this story right here, is about one woman who painted her house black and exposed just how ugly her neighbors really were. They said she moved in at night. No moving trucks, no loud music, just one black SUV that rolled in quiet like a shadow. By morning, the house at the end of our street had a new owner, and everything about her screamed different. The house itself had always been one of those forgotten ones. Old shutters, faded cream paint, a perfect blank canvas in a neighborhood obsessed with beige. When she arrived, people noticed, because people like us always notice. Her name was Elena. I found that out when the HOA president, Nancy, came knocking at my door with a clipboard. She always had one, like it was part of her arm. "Did you see the new neighbor?" she asked. Her voice had that syrupy tone that hides barbed wire underneath. She didn't come to the welcome meeting, not even a hello. I said maybe she was tired. Nancy just smiled. "That's not how we do things here, Daniel." I watched her walk away, already planning something. That's what the HOA does. They don't just manage rules. They manage people. Elena kept to herself those first few weeks. She worked in her yard at night sometimes. Soft music playing. Solar lights glowing faint in the grass. She had this calm about her. Like she didn't care who was watching. And believe me, everyone was watching. From the minute she stepped outside. Curtains moved. Phone cameras peeked. The whole street pretending not to stare. She didn't wave. Didn't smile. Just went about her business. Quietly repainting her fence. Fixing her porch. And ignoring Nancy's friendly reminders. The first letter came after a week. Violation notice. Non-approved exterior modifications. Nancy delivered it herself. She stood at Elena's porch, pretending to be kind. Elena opened the door halfway, listened, didn't argue, just said, "I'll take care of it." Then she closed the door. Nancy stood there for a moment, like she couldn't believe someone had dismissed her that easily. Then she left. I saw it all from across the street. And for some reason, I smiled. Because in this neighborhood, no one ever told Nancy no. A few days later, I passed by while walking my dog. Elena was out front, sanding her porch rails. A streak of black paint marked her forearm. It looked almost deliberate, like a statement. We talked for maybe a minute. I told her I was her neighbor. She said she already knew. Her voice was soft but firm, like someone who's done explaining herself to people. She asked about the HOA. I told her, they like control, and they hate surprises. She laughed. A quiet, beautiful laugh. That sounded like she didn't believe in fear. Then she said something that stuck with me. "Good. Because I've got a surprise they're going to love." That night, Nancy sent a message in the community group chat. It said, "Reminder, all exterior paint colors must be approved by the board before application. Please remember to maintain our community's harmonious aesthetic." Everyone knew who that was for, but no one said her name. By morning, there were cars slowing down in front of Elena's house. She was outside, rolling paint onto her fence. Not white, not gray, not even navy, jet black. It shimmered under the sun like wet glass. I stopped at the edge of my yard, trying not to stare. But you couldn't look away. Every stroke of her roller felt like defiance. By noon, half the fence was black. Nancy showed up, clipboard in hand, lips pressed so tight they looked drawn on. I couldn't hear the words from across the street, but I saw the gestures. Nancy waving papers, pointing at the house. Elena standing there calm, not backing down. Then Elena laughed and turned back to her wall, kept painting. Nancy stormed off, and before sunset, half the neighborhood had already driven by, pretending to take a walk. That night, the group chat exploded. "It's horrible. It ruins the whole street. It looks like a haunted house." I didn't reply, because deep down, I thought it looked beautiful. It stood out. Finally something different in this copy-paste world. But people here don't like different. The next day, Nancy sent an official notice to the HOA list. Emergency board meeting. Violation of community color standards. I laughed when I saw it, because the paint wasn't even dry yet. I passed by Elena's house that evening. The sun was setting behind her roof. The black paint looked like liquid gold under the orange sky. She stood there, arms crossed, paint streaks on her jeans, watching the light fade. I said, "You know they're calling a meeting about you." She smiled. "I know. Aren't you worried?" asked. She turned, looked at me with this calm, unreadable expression. "Daniel," she said, "they built this neighborhood to look perfect. But perfect doesn't mean alive." Then she went back to painting. I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. That night, I heard voices outside. Nancy and her husband, standing near the curb, talking low but loud enough to hear. "She's destroying property values," Nancy hissed. "Do something." Her husband said nothing, just kept looking at the house, shaking his head. When they left, Elena's porch light turned on, a soft amber glow, cutting through the dark, like she was answering them silently. By the end of the week, the house was finished. Every inch of it, from gutters to shutters, jet black. The neighborhood looked pale beside it. People stopped to stare. Some took photos. Others crossed the street to avoid it entirely. And Nancy, well, she looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. She started patrolling daily, walking her dog past that house 5 times a day, leaving flyers, snapping pictures. And every time she did, Elena came out, stood on her porch, and waved. No words, just that smile, like she already knew something no one else did. One morning, I walked outside, and found a new letter taped to my door. Neighborhood petition, request for HOA action. They wanted everyone to sign, to force her to repaint. But I couldn't bring myself to sign it, because for the first time since I'd moved here, the street felt alive. And maybe that's what scared everyone else the most. That night, I saw Elena sitting on her porch, sipping coffee, watching the stars. I walked over. She looked up and smiled. "They hate it," I said. "I know," she replied. "Then why do it?" She leaned back in her chair, looked up at the night sky, and said, "Because this neighborhood needed a little darkness, to remember what light feels like." I didn't know it then, but that was just the beginning. Because when Nancy saw that house the next morning, she didn't just lose her patience. She lost control, and the whole neighborhood went crazy. What would you do if your neighbor painted their house jet black? Support them or side with the HOA? Tell me in the comments, backhand index pointing down. By the next morning, the street looked different, not because of the sunlight or the weather, but because of the tension in the air. It was the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Cars slowed down as they passed Elena's house. Some people stopped right in front of her driveway, pretending to check their phones, but really just staring. And in the middle of it all, stood Nancy, clipboard in one hand, camera phone in the other, snapping photos like she was gathering evidence for the FBI. She was muttering to herself, something about property values and standards of community aesthetics. But the funniest part, Elena didn't even look up. She just kept painting her porch railing. Smooth strokes, steady hands, like the world around her didn't even exist. By noon, word spread that Nancy had called an emergency HOA inspection. That's HOA language for, "We're about to start a war." They showed up in pairs. Nancy, her vice president, Carol, and their newest recruit, a man named Greg, who once filed a noise complaint against a bird feeder. They came armed with clipboards, camera phones, and matching sun hats. They stood in front of Elena's house, talking like police detectives outside a crime scene. I stood across the street with my coffee, pretending to trim my hedge, so I could listen. Carol whispered, "I heard that color absorbs heat and could increase fire risk." Nancy nodded. "I'll bring that up in the meeting. We have grounds for an environmental violation." Greg said, "It just looks evil." That was enough to make me choke on my coffee. Elena finally came outside, wearing a black t-shirt, hair tied back, eyes calm. Nancy waved, the kind of wave that says, "I own this place." "Good morning, Elena," she said sweetly. "Do you have a moment to discuss your paint choice?" Elena wiped her hands on a towel. "Not really," she said, and started walking back inside. Nancy's voice hardened. "This color is not approved by the HOA design board." Elena turned around slowly. "You mean the board that never replied to my request?" Nancy blinked. "What request?" Elena smiled. "The one I emailed last month, with the color sample attached, and the note that said, 'If I don't hear back in 14 days, I'll assume approval.'" Nancy froze. That's the thing about power-hungry people. They love rules, until someone uses those same rules against them. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Even Greg looked nervous. Finally Nancy said, "Well, we'll review it again officially." Elena just shrugged. "Take your time," and closed the door. That was it. No yelling, no drama, just quiet confidence. And that drove Nancy absolutely insane. That night, the HOA Facebook page exploded. Nancy posted something like, "We must protect the visual harmony of our neighborhood. Please attend tonight's emergency meeting." But what really set things off were the comments. Half the neighbors supported Nancy, calling the house an eyesore and a violation of tradition. But the other half said things like, "It's her house, let her live. It looks modern, not scary. At least she keeps her lawn trimmed, unlike Greg." That last one got 27 likes. When I took out my trash later that night, I saw Elena sitting on her porch again, a single lamp glowing beside her. "You saw the posts?" asked. She nodded, but she didn't look angry. She looked entertained. "They're losing their minds," I said. "That's because they've never met someone who doesn't care about fitting in," she replied. I smiled. "So, what's next?" She grinned. "Oh, Daniel, I'm just getting started." 2 days later, Nancy showed up again, this time with the entire board. She had printouts, legal forms, copies of the HOA handbook, and a very dramatic pair of sunglasses. They knocked on her door 3 times, loud enough for everyone to hear. Elena answered, wearing black overalls and a baseball cap. Nancy started her speech. "Elena, you are in direct violation of Community Guidelines 6A and 9B regarding color coordination and approval requirements." But Elena interrupted her. She stepped outside and pointed at the sky. "Do you see that?" Nancy squinted. "The sky." Elena nodded. "Do you see how the clouds shift colors every few seconds? No one tells them what shade they can be." Nancy blinked. "I don't follow." Elena smiled. "Exactly." Then she turned around and went back inside. The next day, the story hit the local newspaper. Suburban drama, woman paints home jet black, HOA in uproar. Someone had leaked the photo, and suddenly, everyone in town wanted to drive by the Black House. Teenagers took selfies. A YouTuber did a mini vlog, and even a realtor posted a video saying, "This might lower property values, but raise curiosity." Nancy nearly fainted at the next HOA meeting, which of course I attended because I live for drama. The tension was unreal. Nancy stood at the front of the room, reading from a stack of printed complaints, as if she were prosecuting a criminal case. "Community harmony," she kept saying. "Visual disruption. Property damage risk." But when it was time for the vote, the result shocked everyone. 5 votes for forcing Elena to repaint. 5 votes against. It was a tie. Nancy's face went pale. Her power, her perfect control, cracked for the first time. After the meeting, I walked out into the cool night air and saw Elena waiting in her car nearby. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" asked. She smiled. I read their rules front to back before I moved here. You planned this. She looked at me. Let's just say I like teaching control freaks a little lesson in control. By the weekend, Nancy had put up a community beautification project sign near Elena's lawn, as if to distract from the chaos. But it didn't work. People were driving slower. Neighbors were gossiping louder. And somehow, the house everyone hated became the house everyone wanted to see. And deep down, I think Elena knew exactly what she was doing. Because the black paint wasn't rebellion anymore. It was a mirror, showing everyone who they really were. That night, Nancy left another note taped to her door. Something about fines and mandatory compliance. The next morning, Elena taped her own note over it. It said, "Dear HOA, I'm not repainting, but you're welcome to bring your brushes and try. Coffee will be ready." The neighborhood lost its mind again. I watched her from my window, wondering what kind of person could stay this calm when everyone around her was falling apart. And then it hit me. Maybe she wasn't trying to win. Maybe she was trying to make a point. Because sometimes, the loudest rebellion is just silence and a paintbrush. If you were Elena, would you fight the HOA like this, or just repaint and avoid trouble? Comment what you do, backhand index pointing down. They called it the emergency homeowners hearing. But everyone knew what it really was. A witch trial. Nancy sent out the invitations in bold red letters. Mandatory attendance required. HOA enforcement meeting. Even the mailman looked nervous handing it out. By that evening, the community hall parking lot was packed. SUVs and minivans lined up like soldiers. People whispering, holding coffee cups, ready to witness a suburban showdown. I showed up late, because, honestly, I just wanted to watch it burn. Inside, the air felt thick. The folding chairs were arranged in perfect rows. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us like angry bees. At the front sat Nancy, in her pastel pink blazer, flanked by the board members, each with their own binder of evidence. And right in the center of the room sat Elena. She didn't fidget, didn't cross her arms, didn't even blink much. She looked calm, composed, almost bored. Nancy tapped her mic. "Let's begin." The meeting started with a slideshow. Nancy had actually made a PowerPoint presentation. Slide 1, Community Harmony. Slide 2, Uniform Aesthetic Guidelines. Slide 3, a giant picture of Elena's house, jet black, zoomed in like it was a mugshot. Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered, "It looks like something out of a vampire movie." Nancy nodded dramatically. "This is what happens when residents ignore the rules that protect us all." She clicked to the next slide. The color palette, approved tones only. Then she pointed at the list. Sandstone, almond, ivory, misty gray. Her voice got higher. "And nowhere on this list do you see jet black." It would have been funny if it wasn't so serious. Elena finally spoke. Her voice was calm, measured, but it cut through the noise like glass. "Did you get my approval email, Nancy?" The room went quiet. Nancy blinked. I don't recall receiving any such communication." Elena tilted her head. "That's strange. Because I have the timestamp. Sent to your HOA inbox at 9:42 a.m., June 12th. Nancy stiffened, and the guy running the projector, Greg, shifted uncomfortably. Then Elena pulled out her phone, scrolled, and held it up. Everyone saw the screen, the email, the attached paint sample, the message, "If no response is received within 14 days, approval will be assumed." And below it, Nancy's own automated reply, "Your message has been received." The room erupted in whispers. Nancy's face turned red. She tried to smile. "Well, that's clearly a misunderstanding." Elena nodded. "Sure. Let's call it that." You could feel it. The shift in power. The HOA board looked uneasy. Neighbors exchanged looks. And for the first time, Nancy's voice cracked. But she didn't back down. She clicked to the next slide. Negative impact on property value. "We've had complaints," she said. "Buyers are reconsidering homes on this street. The black house makes the neighborhood appear unsafe. Elena raised an eyebrow. Unsafe? It's paint, not a pit bull. Laughter broke out in the back row. Nancy slammed her hand on the table. This isn't funny. Oh, it is, Elena said quietly. You're mad because I didn't ask for your permission to exist. That line, hit like a hammer. Even the board members looked away. The meeting dragged on for an hour. People argued, shouted, stood up and stormed out. Some defended Elena. Others blamed her for destroying unity. And through it all, Nancy clung to her clipboard, like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Finally she snapped. If you won't repaint, she said, then we'll fine you daily until you comply. Elena stood up slowly, walked to the front of the room, and leaned toward the mic. Fine me all you want, she said, because every letter, every dollar, every threat will go straight to my lawyer. Silence. The kind of silence that changes things. She continued, and when he's done, you'll owe me more than the cost of paint. Then she smiled, softly, politely, and left the room. The second she was gone, Nancy started spinning. She's bluffing, she said. She won't sue, she can't. But her voice cracked again, and no one believed her, because everyone had seen it. That calm, that control, that terrifying kind of confidence, that only comes from someone who knows they've already won. When the meeting ended, I walked outside into the cool night air. Elena was leaning against her car, arms crossed, looking up at the sky. How'd I do? She asked. I laughed. You didn't just win, you wrecked her. She smiled. Good. Maybe now they'll stop pretending to own people. Asked, what happens if they don't? She turned toward her house. Lights glowing faintly under the night sky. Black walls shining like obsidian. Then, she said, I'll show them what power really looks like. By the next morning, Nancy had sent out a community memo claiming that ongoing legal discussions were underway. But nobody cared anymore. Half the street quietly admired Elena, and the other half quietly feared her. And the best part, real estate agents had started showing the street again, calling it modern contrast aesthetics. The very thing Nancy swore would destroy property value was now making it rise. Irony doesn't get better than that. But Nancy didn't take defeat well. She started walking her dog past Elena's house every evening, pretending not to stare. But everyone knew. Sometimes she'd stop, snap another photo, then rush off before Elena could notice. Only, Elena always noticed. One night, I saw her standing in the window, watching Nancy walk away. And for a second, the faintest smile crossed her face. A smile that said, this isn't over. And deep down, I knew it wasn't. Because people like Nancy don't quit, they plot. And people like Elena don't back down, they wait. And somewhere in between, our perfect little neighborhood was about to become the battlefield for both. Engagement question. If your HOA tried to fine you for painting your own house, would you pay it or fight back like Elena? Tell me in the comments, backhand index pointing down. It started small, like it always does. No one ever declares war in a neighborhood outright. They just start with noise. One morning, Elena's trash bins were missing. The next day, someone poured fertilizer across her driveway, thick streaks of white dust, like chalk lines around a crime scene. And when she washed it off, the sprinklers from Nancy's yard suddenly sprayed toward her fence. Every morning at the same time. For exactly 5 minutes. Accident. Please. This was suburban warfare. I watched it all unfold from my porch, pretending to sip my coffee. But honestly, it was better than television. Elena, though, she didn't flinch. She just kept living, watering her plants, reading on her porch, listening to music late at night. And every act of calm, drove Nancy further off the deep end. Then came the letters. Printed, official-looking ones. Left in Elena's mailbox, unsigned. But everyone knew where they came from. You are lowering property standards. Some of us work hard to maintain beauty and order. You don't belong here. The kind of poison that sounds polite. Until you read between the lines. Elena collected them all. Kept them in a folder. Like evidence. And one afternoon, she showed them to me. Look at this, she said, handing me the stack. I flipped through the pages. Each one nastier than the last. I asked if she was going to report it. She smiled. Oh, I don't need to. What do you mean? She closed the folder carefully. I just need to wait. They'll report themselves eventually. 2 days later, Nancy filed a formal neighborhood complaint against Elena's mailbox. Apparently, the color of the post didn't match community standards. The irony, it was beige, exactly the same color as Nancy's. Elena didn't even argue. She just repainted it. Jet black. Again. And that was the spark that lit the fire. The next morning, Nancy called a landscaper and ordered him to trim the shared hedge line. By trim, she meant destroy. When I came home from work, half of Elena's rose bushes were gone. Roots exposed. The soil torn up like an open wound. She was standing there, hands on her hips, watching the landscaper's truck drive away. Guess he got the wrong address, she said dryly. But her eyes, they were different that day. Calm, but sharper, like she'd made a decision. That evening, the HOA board got a letter, delivered by certified mail, addressed directly to Nancy. I didn't know what was in it at first, but the next day, I saw Nancy's car leave the neighborhood, and she didn't come back for hours. When she did, she looked shaken. Later, I asked Elena what she'd sent. She smiled. Oh, just a friendly reminder that mail tampering, property damage, and targeted harassment are all felonies. Then she sipped her coffee, like she'd just mentioned the weather. But Nancy wasn't done. She switched tactics. She started turning the neighbors against Elena, whispering in driveways, posting subtle comments in the Facebook group. Did anyone else hear strange noises last night? Is that black paint attracting heat damage? I just hope our insurance rates don't go up. It worked on some of them. The whispers grew. The stares got longer. People crossed the street when they walked their dogs. Kids stopped biking past her house. The black house had become a myth. Then, one night, around midnight, I heard shouting. I stepped outside and saw flashlights across the street. 2 police cars, Nancy and her husband, standing in Elena's yard. My stomach dropped. I rushed over. What happened? Asked. Nancy turned furious. She's violating curfew ordinances, painting after hours. It's against community peace rules. I looked around. There was no sound, no paint cans, no tools, just Elena standing on her porch, in her robe, looking confused. One of the officers asked, "Ma'am, are you doing any construction work tonight?" Elena blinked. "Just drinking tea." The other officer sighed and turned to Nancy. "Ma'am, this isn't an emergency call. You can't use 911 for neighborhood disputes." Nancy stammered. "But she—" "No, ma'am," the officer cut in. "If this happens again, you could face a fine. I swear." I almost laughed out loud. Nancy's face turned white as chalk. After they left, I walked over to Elena's porch. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly. "They called the cops because I refused to blend in." Her voice was calm, but her eyes looked tired, like she'd seen this pattern before, somewhere else in her life. Asked, "Why don't you just move? It's not worth it." She smiled faintly. "Because if I move, they win. And people like that, don't deserve to win. Then she looked at her house, the black paint glowing under the porch light, and whispered, "This place finally looks like it belongs to me." For a few days after that, things got quiet again. Too quiet. Nancy stopped walking her dog. The HOA group chat went silent. Even the board members avoided eye contact in the street. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived in everyone's mailbox, stamped with Elena's name. Inside was a copy of an official legal notice. It read, "Any further acts of harassment, defamation, or property interference directed toward my residence or myself will be met with immediate legal response. This letter is a formal cease and desist, filed under state harassment statutes." Every single house got one, even mine. And just like that, the whispers stopped. The neighborhood went silent again. But this time, it wasn't calm. It was fear. Because suddenly, the woman everyone mocked had turned the law into her shield. And the HOA realized they'd picked a fight they couldn't win. That night, I saw Nancy's lights still on past midnight. Her blinds were closed, but I could see her silhouette pacing. Meanwhile, Elena sat on her porch, sipping coffee, music playing softly. She caught me looking, and smiled, that same terrifyingly calm smile, like someone who knew the game was finally tilting in her favor. If your HOA president tried to turn your whole neighborhood against you, what would you do? Would you fight back like Elena, or disappear quietly? Tell me below. Backhand index pointing down. The letter changed everything. After Elena's cease and desist, the HOA went completely silent. No meetings, no warnings, no yard notices. Just quiet. Too quiet. It felt like the whole street was holding its breath, waiting for the next blow. And trust me, it came. One morning, Nancy's car wasn't in her driveway, but a white SUV with tinted windows was. Two men in suits got out, carrying clipboards and camera equipment. They started taking pictures of Elena's house, her yard, her fence line. I walked outside, pretending to check my mail. One of them nodded politely, asked, "HOA inspection again?" He smiled thinly. "Legal documentation, sir." My stomach twisted. This wasn't an HOA visit. It was a lawsuit. That afternoon, Nancy posted in the community group, "We regret to inform residents that one homeowner's repeated disregard for aesthetic unity has forced the HOA to take formal action to protect neighborhood property values." No names, but everyone knew. The comment section went wild. Half the neighbors praised her for standing up for order. The other half said she was turning the street into a circus. And Elena, she didn't post a word. She just took her lawn chair out, sat on her porch, and read a book. The next day, a document showed up taped to her door. A full civil complaint. Violation of community bylaws. Detriment to property value. Refusal to comply with written warnings. It even included damages sought, $25,000. I watched her read it quietly. Her face didn't change. She folded the paper neatly and went inside. 3 days later, a new car appeared in front of her house. Sleek, black, and expensive. Out stepped a man in a gray suit. Confident. Calm. He knocked once. Elena opened the door, and the two talked quietly for a while. When he left, she smiled for the first time in weeks. That night, she came over with a glass of wine. "You're looking at the newest legal nightmare. For the Maplewood HOA," she said. I laughed. "What did you do?" She took a sip. "I hired someone who loves taking HOA bullies apart. He's a property law specialist, and he doesn't lose." Her voice was calm, steady, and somehow dangerous. The following week was chaos. Nancy tried to rally the board again, but one of the members quit. Then another. Apparently, they didn't want their names on a lawsuit, because Elena had countersued for harassment, defamation, and violation of homeowners' rights. Nancy tried to downplay it, claiming it was a misunderstanding, but it was too late. The lawsuit was real, and it had teeth. I remember the first court day. Half the neighborhood showed up. You could feel the tension. People whispering, some pretending not to stare at Elena. Nancy strutted in with her HOA folder, acting like she was attending a tea party. But Elena walked in with her lawyer. Composed, black blazer, hair tied neatly. She didn't even look at Nancy. When the judge entered, you could almost hear the silence sharpen. Nancy's lawyer started, all official sounding. Your Honor, this homeowner has consistently and deliberately violated our community aesthetic agreement, which was signed by all residents upon purchase. Elena's lawyer interrupted. Actually, Your Honor, she didn't sign anything, because her property predates the formation of the HOA. Nancy froze. The judge frowned. Is that true? Nancy stammered. Well, the bylaws. The bylaws, the lawyer said, cannot retroactively bind properties not under their jurisdiction. The judge nodded slowly. Continue. The courtroom shifted. The balance had changed. Over the next hour, Elena's lawyer dismantled every claim. He showed pictures, documents, emails, even Nancy's anonymous letters. Turns out, Nancy's own printer watermark was visible on the threatening notes. You could feel the air leave the room. Nancy's husband put his head in his hands. When Elena finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but unshakable. I just wanted to live in peace, she said. I didn't paint my house to make a statement. I painted it because I liked it. I didn't join the HOA because I didn't have to. They chose to make me the villain for it. You could see the judge's expression soften. When the ruling came, it was brutal. The judge dismissed every HOA claim and ordered Nancy personally to pay Elena's legal fees. But that wasn't the end, because Elena's counterclaim, the harassment one, was still pending. The HOA's insurance wouldn't cover malicious conduct, which meant Nancy herself was on the hook. The look on her face, it was pure disbelief, like she'd just realized the monster she built was turning on her. When we got back to the neighborhood, no one said a word. Nancy's car was still parked out front, but her blinds were closed. Elena sat on her porch again, a cup of tea steaming beside her. She looked at me and said softly, "It's not about winning. It's about making them stop thinking they own everyone else." Then she smiled, not out of triumph, but something else, relief, maybe even sadness, like someone who'd fought a long war and finally saw the end coming. A few weeks later, rumors started again. Nancy was stepping down from the HOA board, moving to another city. For family reasons, the new board president sent out a letter. In plain, nervous language, we'd like to rebuild community trust and ensure all residents feel respected and heard. Translation: they were terrified. Elena didn't brag, didn't gloat. She just painted her fence, fixed her garden, and put out a new sign by her mailbox. A small black plaque, with gold letters, "Private property. No soliciting. No HOA." And just like that, peace returned to Maplewood. But sometimes, late at night, when I sit on my porch, I see the reflection of that jet-black house across the street, shining under the streetlight, and I realize something. The HOA didn't just lose control of a house. They lost control of the idea that they could control everything. Elena won the lawsuit, and the neighborhood learned to shut up. But I can't help wondering, what happens when someone else paints their house black? If you were Elena, and your HOA dragged you to court for painting your house, would you fight back, or just move away? Be honest. Backhand index pointing down. The neighborhood changed after the lawsuit. You could feel it in the air, like a storm that had passed, but left everything damp and heavy. No more HOA patrols. No more warning letters. No more Nancy standing in her yard with that fake smile. But it didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. People stopped waving at each other. The morning dog walkers changed their routes. The block felt smaller, quieter, and somehow more honest. Because everyone had finally seen what the HOA really was. Control, masked as community. Nancy's house stayed dark for weeks. Sometimes I'd see the curtains move. But she didn't come out. Her perfect lawn grew uneven. Her mailbox leaned slightly to the left. And no one dared to say a word about it. Even the HOA board meeting sign, that used to sit proudly at the community center, was gone. One evening, I saw a moving truck outside her house. Boxes stacked up. Garage open. Nancy pacing around in sweatpants. No clipboard. No pearls. No smile. She looked exhausted. When she saw me watching, she hesitated, then walked over. "Daniel," she said quietly, "I never wanted it to get that far." I didn't say anything. She rubbed her forehead. "They made me the face of it. But it wasn't just me. The board wanted to make an example out of her. I just didn't stop them." I looked at her for a long time. She wasn't the monster anymore. Just another neighbor who got caught in her own web. I nodded slowly. "Then I guess you both lost something." She didn't reply, just gave a sad little smile, and went back inside. By the next morning, her house was empty. No car, no lights, no sign she ever lived there. But somehow, her ghost stayed behind. Every time someone mentioned the HOA, people lowered their voices. And every time they passed Elena's house, they stared just a little too long. That jet-black paint, it gleamed under the sun like armor. Elena, on the other hand, was finally free. She started spending more time outside, planting roses, painting her porch chairs, talking to the mailman. Sometimes she'd wave at me, and I could see that the tension she used to carry in her shoulders was gone. But freedom came with its own price. Some neighbors still avoided her. Others whispered things like, "She ruined the neighborhood's reputation." It was funny. They were living proof that control dies hard. A few weeks later, I got an invitation in my mailbox. A simple white envelope. No HOA logo this time. Inside was a handwritten note. "Community gathering, Saturday 6 p.m. Everyone welcome. No rules. No agenda. Just people. Signed, Elena." I went. Almost everyone did. There were folding chairs set up on her lawn. Fairy lights hanging from the trees. A small speaker playing soft music. People brought food. Kids ran around barefoot. And for the first time in months, people laughed. Elena stood in front of her house. Black paint gleaming behind her like a symbol of quiet rebellion. She tapped her glass gently. "I think we forgot what it meant to live next to each other," she said. "Not under each other. Just next to each other." People nodded. No speeches. No votes. No authority. Just neighbors. Later that night, I stood near the edge of her yard, watching the glow from the lights reflect off her house. She came over, smiling softly. "You think they'll ever stop judging the color?" she asked. I shrugged. "Maybe not. But at least now they'll keep it to themselves." She laughed quietly. "That's good enough for me." Then she looked up at her own house, and said something that stuck with me. "They thought black meant rebellion. But for me, it means peace. No more pretending. No more fitting in." Time passed. The HOA officially dissolved that fall. The lawyer fees, the resignations, the bad publicity, it all killed whatever fake order they had left. The neighborhood went independent again, each house standing on its own. And guess what? Nothing fell apart. People mowed their lawns, painted their fences, planted gardens, and somehow everything looked better, because everyone had stopped worrying about being perfect. A few months later, I got a knock on my door. A young couple stood outside, smiling nervously. "Hi, we're thinking about buying Nancy's old house. You've lived here a while, right? How's the neighborhood?" I paused for a second, looked over their shoulders at Elena's house, then back at them. "It's peaceful now," I said. "Just don't join any clubs." They laughed, but I wasn't joking. Later that night, I found myself walking past Elena's house again. She was sitting on her porch with her dog, a cup of coffee in her hand. She waved. "Another quiet night," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "Almost too quiet." She smiled. "I'll take quiet over control any day." And for the first time, I realized she wasn't just the woman who painted her house black. She was the reason everyone else could finally breathe. Sometimes, I still think about how small things start big wars. A can of paint, a letter, a rule book. But when power hides behind politeness, and people forget how to say no, even a color can turn into a revolution. Elena didn't set out to start one, but she did. And Maplewood would never be the same again. That night, as the streetlights flickered on, the black paint of her house shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting every light around it. It didn't look rebellious anymore. It looked like freedom. Speech balloon comment question. If you were in that neighborhood, would you stand by Elena or stay silent to keep things peaceful? Tell me honestly. Backhand index pointing down. It had been almost a year since the day the HOA collapsed. The street was calm again. Children rode bikes in the evenings. Sprinklers ticked rhythmically. Mailboxes looked different colors now. Life had gone back to normal. Or maybe a better version of normal. But then the letter came. It was a Thursday morning. Late spring. The kind of morning where the air smells like cut grass and second chances. I opened my mailbox. And there it was. A cream-colored envelope. No stamp. No return address. Just my name in careful handwriting. I felt that tiny shiver down my neck. Because I'd seen that handwriting before. Nancy. I turned it over in my hands. For a second I thought about throwing it away. But curiosity has teeth. And it bit hard. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly in three. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it wasn't hate either. It said, "Daniel, you were right. I lost myself trying to control everything. The HOA started as a way to protect this neighborhood, but somewhere along the way it started owning me instead. I wanted order. I ended up with chaos. Tell Elena I'm sorry. I know she won't believe it. But I mean it. I sold the house. The new owners seem kind. Maybe that's enough. Take care of the place. Nancy." I read it twice. Then again. Until the words blurred. That night, I walked across the street to Elena's house. The porch light was on. The same soft golden glow that made the black paint shimmer like polished stone. She was there. Reading again. Barefoot. Her dog asleep beside her. I handed her the letter. She looked at it. Hesitated. Then opened it slowly. Her eyes moved line by line. Her face didn't change. But I saw her throat tighten. When she finished, she folded the paper. And whispered. I never hated her. I just hated what she became. She looked out toward the empty house across the street. It's strange. How quiet victory feels, she said. Weeks passed. The neighborhood adjusted. New families moved in. Kids drew chalk on the sidewalks again. No bylaws. No board. No warnings. Just people. Sometimes I caught myself missing the drama. The tension. The unspoken war that made every day feel like a secret episode of something bigger. But then I'd see Elena sitting on her porch. Content. And I'd remember why peace matters more. One evening, she called me over. I'm repainting, she said. I froze for a second. You're repainting? She smiled. Not the house. The porch. Just the trim. Time to freshen it up. I laughed. You scared me for a second there. She dipped her brush into the can. But the color wasn't black this time. It was a soft gray. Still bold, but gentle. Black got me through the war, she said. Gray is for living after it. The next day, I helped her hang new lights along the porch roof. The glow against the gray would look like quiet fireflies. We didn't talk much, just worked in easy silence. When we were done, she stood back and nodded. Looks lighter, I said. She smiled. Yeah. Maybe now people will stop thinking I'm hiding something dark inside. I wanted to tell her that even if she had painted it bright pink, they'd still talk. Because that's what people do when someone refuses to bend. But I didn't. I just said, they'll get used to it. Later that night, I sat on my own porch. The air warm, the street calm. I thought about Nancy, about how she'd built a little empire of control, and lost it all to one can of paint. And I thought about Elena, how one woman's defiance became everyone's freedom. Maybe that's how change works. Not with speeches or protests, but with small, stubborn acts of normalcy, like painting your house the color you want, and daring anyone to stop you. A few days later, I saw something new in Elena's yard. A small wooden box, standing on a post near the sidewalk. A little free library, painted the same soft gray as her porch. Inside were a few novels, a kid's storybook, and a small framed photo of her standing beside her house, smiling, paintbrush in hand. At the bottom, a tiny label read, "Freedom looks good in every color." I smiled, because that was Elena's way of saying she'd moved on. And maybe we all had. That weekend, the neighborhood held another gathering. No one planned it. It just happened. Music, food, kids running everywhere. Someone even joked about forming a new HOA. The whole crowd groaned and burst out laughing. For the first time, even the joke didn't sting. Elena raised her glass. To peace and paint. Everyone cheered. When I went home that night, I looked one last time at her house. The soft gray shimmered in the moonlight. Not as armor, but as reflection. It wasn't rebellion anymore. It was balance. The kind of peace that only comes after surviving something ugly. Before I went to bed, I placed Nancy's letter in my drawer. Not because I forgave her completely, but because some stories deserve to end quietly. And this one finally had. Every time I walk through Maplewood, I notice the colors. A blue house, a cream one, a bright yellow door down the street, and in the middle, Elena's gray-black home. Like a quiet reminder. Rules don't build communities. People do. And sometimes, the best kind of neighbor is the one who refuses to be controlled. If your HOA tried to control the color of your house, what shade would you paint it to make a point? Drop your power color in the comments, backhand index pointing down.